Hello and welcome back to FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and coming up, Andrew Cox is going to give us a shipper update. But first, we're going to go to Zach Strickland with a carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, and welcome to your Wednesday carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Zach Strickland. So it's been a while since we've checked in with our outbound tender volume index and outbound tender rejection index the last couple of days. So let's check in on them real fast. We've got, volumes continue to trend higher, and this is the OTVI, so it is total tender volumes. So keep that in mind. That is simply there to measure the magnitude and direction of demand in the market for freight. Or for capacity, I should say. So we're seeing those total tender volumes increase, but at the same time, accepted tender volumes, if we did the math on it, have increased roughly 10% since the end of July to where they are now. So total load volumes are on the rise as well. Tender rejection rates reflecting that with over 25.4% tender rejection rate right now, jumping up again the last couple of days after taking a little bit of a hiatus. But again, we expected to see this week as we're approaching Labor Day. 3-day weekend holiday tends to tighten capacity, but demand remains very strong leading into this period of time. Looking at the overall nation, what's driving a lot of this capacity tightness and where is it tightening the most significantly? Looking at our map over there, anything in the blue, light blue, and dark blue is going to indicate an increase in the weighted rejection index. Now, this is a combination of tender volumes and weekly change in tender rejection rates. So it's a very near-term index. It's there to measure any kind of volatility, where I need to pay attention to, what situations have changed week over week that I need to pay attention to. If I'm a carrier, these are the areas that are going to see changes in spot market activity. If they're in the red, like we see Ontario over there for the first time in a long time, and we'll talk about that here in a bit, that means the tender rejection rates are coming down with significant volume. And Ontario, of course, is the largest single market in the United States, so any change in tender rejection rate is going to command a lot of value from the weighted rejection index. Looking at the other side of the country, however, looking at the East Coast, a lot of blue in the southeast and over there towards Houston. Of course, we had a big hurricane hit the coast of Louisiana last week. Could be creating some capacity tightness down there as carriers are helping out with the recovery efforts in Lake Charles and the areas that were most impacted. Houston did see an influx of inbound volume last week, but outbound volume not as strong. But this is there to measure the change in tender rejection rate along with, the total volumes in the market. It does not necessarily care about the change in volume, simply the change in tender rejection rate. So blue down there in the Houston market, but elsewhere in the East Coast, really seeing a lot of blue show up, and that's what's driving a lot of the tender rejection rates higher and combating and offsetting some of that Ontario volume. Looking at our weighted rejection index list here, Houston leads the list with a 6 value. Anything between about a -5 and a 5 is what we normally consider a more stable or normal environment. That means there's not a lot of volatility in the market. We still have a decent amount of volatility, but it is operating at a very high level of rejection rate. So capacity is very tight. It's just not changing significantly off of that high level. So we're not seeing a lot of huge drops, nor are we seeing a lot of huge increases right now. Houston leading the way with 6. Milwaukee up there, also 5.8. So definitely check that area out. In Denver, Colorado, the consummate backhaul market has been a very volatile market this year. So again, it may not be the worst market to enter if you are a carrier. Looking at Houston real fast, I've broken it out by the lengths of haul. So tweener rejection rates, long haul rejection rates leading the way in the Houston market. That's what's driving a lot of the volatility in Houston right now. So carriers simply aren't trying to leave that market. Anything over 450 miles should be showing up on the spot market right now. Long haul volumes actually increased versus last week and yesterday. City volumes going down. This is more of a local market in general. So Houston seeing a lot of long haul demand not being met right now. Looking out in Ontario, Ontario did show a red, but it's because it's coming down off of a significant high last week. You can see that peak just a week ago. That's what that OTRI-W is calculating right now. And we just dropped back down to about a 28% from a 30% tender rejection rate. Again, still very tight out there in Southern California. So do not discount the spot market activity out there. And that'll do it for today's carrier update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Hello and welcome to the Shipper Update. I'm here with Andrew Cox. Andrew, it's been a while. We usually break things out in terms of manufacturing and consumer action. What's going on with the latest with consumers?
So we have the latest consumer confidence from the conference board. This is for the month of August. We've also got some data we're going to talk about on housing and on motor vehicle sales and durable goods demand in general. So as we kind of have expected, we did see that consumer confidence jumped quite a bit in the month of June. We had expected a bit of a pullback, a little bit of a kind of out of the gates, a rush to judgment, so to say, that people were kind of pent up optimism, so to say, and that thing has fallen back a little bit. So we've fallen back a few points here, and it's been all three of the components of the conference's board. Consumer confidence index has fallen back for the month of August.
And so all three components are talking near term and long term and current situation, right?
Yeah, precisely. So we've got the overall, which is the top line number. It shaved off about 7 points. The one that's the biggest deal here is that the present situation index. It declined sharply. Expectations, which is kind of the 6-month outlook, also declined, but not as sharply as present situation. And the big thing about this present situation is that the consumers say that both business conditions and employment prospects have deteriorated over the month. This is, again, not a surprise. We look at the unemployment benefits. We still have roughly 30 million Americans on unemployment benefits. The unemployment rate remains high. Consumers are just seeing these things in the market and taking it into consideration with in terms of their spending.
Right, and so when we're looking at freight, I mean, we're looking at the OTVI hitting all-time highs, but when we're looking at some of these other consumer roles, we're also having to consider that the services sector has been struggling this entire month. Not something that necessarily moves freight, but definitely something that affects the consumer.
Yeah, it affects the consumer. It actually benefits freight a little bit. You know, we've talked about this ad nauseum, that consumers have replaced some of their lack of services spending on goods. That's definitely benefited freight. Some of those things that may be benefiting is the durable goods. While this does, this involves a lot of business spending. If you take the non-defense capital goods or the core capital goods, it was up slightly in the month of July. This is a lagging data, of course. For the month of July, it was up about 1.9%. In the month of June, it was up about 4%. So that has slowed down a bit. But top line, we had a really strong durable goods demand, 11.2% for the month of July, led mostly by transportation equipment. That was up 35% month over month. And then also we had motor vehicle parts and sales. That was up roughly 20%. So the big ticket items are actually holding up pretty well despite consumer confidence faltering a little bit in the last couple months.
Right, and so those areas that you mentioned that are seeing some strength are consumer facing. So as you mentioned, transportation and motor vehicle sales. So it's good to see that this is moving upwards on a month-to-month basis, but still a little bit down on a year-over-year basis, I believe, but still showing that recovery overall.
Yeah, just slightly, which is good. I mean, given the backdrop, given the 30 million Americans on unemployment benefits, given everything involved, the lack of second stimulus that we haven't had yet, given all of that, things are holding up pretty well, especially if we look at the housing market, which it has some other factors at play here. We have that relocation variable at play where people are leaving some of the bigger cities. We also have people like people in our age group that we've talked about. Kind of the sentiment is changing towards house ownership, where it's becoming a bigger deal, a bigger focus for us. So that's another thing benefiting the housing market. It's up almost 900,000 new home sales on a yearly basis. That's the highest level since 2006. A very strong number, and that's another reason the housing builders index is so high and the home building stocks are trending so high right now. The housing market is quite strong, due again in part to great demand and low interest rates.
And demand is right. I mean, typically we see in a balanced market about 6 months of supply. I think this has fallen somewhere to around 4 months.
Yeah, you're right. I think the new homes that were put on sale were a little under 300,000 right now. So yeah, about a 4-month supply. You're right. There's a low inventory for housing right now.
And that's also keeping pricing surprisingly high because of that. Andrew, any expectations for, I guess, employment or consumer outlook in the coming months?
I think a lot of the consumer side depends on that second stimulus. I know there's been a lot of talks. The talks have died down the last couple of weeks because we've had a congressional recess, so we're waiting for them to come back. But I think that's going to be a big deal if we can get that second stimulus, another direct payment to consumers. I think that consumer confidence will build up a little bit towards the back end of the year. But without that, we could see further deterioration into the new year.
Excellent. Andrew, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for tuning in. That's going to do it for this Wednesday edition of FreightWaves Now. As always, you can check out our content on our FreightWaves TV app and all your favorite streaming platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.